All right, let's jump right into it. Today, we're tackling one of the oldest, most persistent tensions in human history. How do we actually pass down knowledge? For centuries, we've basically been caught in this massive tug of war. On one side, you have deeply personalized, life-changing mentorship. And on the other, highly scalable, ultra-efficient mass education. It kind of feels like you can never have both, right? Well, today we are breaking down a really fascinating piece by Jin Lee from Pekanockery, which maps out a totally different approach in this explainer. The text hits us right away with this central dilemma. And honestly, it's the exact question keeping modern parents and educators up at night. As the source material points out, if building a massive, rigid institution inevitably crushes the individual spirit of a student, well, the principled answer might just be to avoid institutions altogether. But if you do that, you can only reach a tiny handful of people. So what do we actually do? How are we supposed to navigate society's demands for qualifications without, completely losing the soul of the learner? To understand this, picture a scaffold used to build a beautiful building. It's supposed to be temporary, right? It's literally just there to help you construct the core. But what happens when the scaffolding becomes the permanent structure? The source calls this the scaffold problem. It's when the good intentions that initially built our educational systems just harden. They turn into strict identity markers, heavy rules, and endless bureaucracies that end up caging the exact minds they were meant to liberate. So, that brings us to Section 1, the educational trade-off. Let's do a super quick recap of how we actually got here. Back in the 19th century, industrial mass schooling was born out of a very real need to prepare huge populations for an industrializing world. Then, jumping ahead to 1929, we see this incredible rebellion. Jiddu Krishnamurti, a guy groomed to lead a massive spiritual institution, completely dissolves it just to protect individual freedom. Fast forward to the late 20th century, educator John Taylor Gatto exposes the harsh realities of that industrial schooling machine. And finally, here we are today, a brand new generation entering the age of AI, which is literally forcing us to rethink the whole shebang. You've basically got these two massive extremes. On one side, Jiddu Krishnamurti's purely personal approach. He believed everyone must climb their own mountain, totally unstructured, unforced. On the exact opposite side, you have the industrial schooling machine. It is standardized, it's efficient, it's measurable. Honestly, it operates like a factory floor, mass-producing compliant workers. Now, Krishnamurti's move, incredibly brave. But, it came with a huge cost. By flat-out refusing to build a transmission structure, by refusing to create an institution to pass his teachings on at scale, his pure insight was preserved. He didn't compromise his principles for a second. But his reach, it remained incredibly limited. He basically had to give up on scale to save the truth. Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, Scale Without Depth. Enter John Taylor Gatto. The author draws on his work because Gatto actually spent 30 years in the public school trenches, and he concluded that the system successfully transmits 7 very specific lessons: confusion, class position, indifference, emotional dependency, intellectual dependency, provisional self-esteem, and surveillance. Now, looking at that list, your first instinct is probably to think, wow, this system is deeply, deeply broken. But here's the absolute gut punch of this explainer. The system isn't failing. It is working exactly as it was designed to. As the source so powerfully states, the dependency is the intended outcome, not a side effect. The industrial education system was built from the ground up to create compliant citizens who would sit in rows, listen for the bell, and do repetitive tasks without ever questioning authority. That is genuine scale for sure, but it is totally devoid of inner principle. And here's why we really need to be talking about this right now. The machine has spent over a century training humans to be compliant robots. But guess what? Artificial intelligence is vastly superior at being a compliant robot. It performs compliance better, faster, and cheaper than any human ever could. We are actively churning out graduates trained for the exact tasks that AI has already mastered. So how do these massive institutions keep ticking? Well, they fuse their brand with your personal identity. You literally become the institution. But what the individual actually needs is inner awakening. The author uses this beautiful Islamic concept of taqwa, which is a genuine conscious inner awareness, much like Al-Ghazali's framework, to contrast what we genuinely need versus the identity performance that institutions demand. We need inner truth, guys, not just social conformity. All right, let's look at the solution in Section 3, the PMC middle path. Here is the brilliant synthesis. This explainer shows exactly how the Open PMC protocol takes the absolute best of both worlds. From Krishnamurti's unstructured personal approach, it borrows freedom, no grading of inner states, no identity fusion, no demand for brand loyalty. You keep your soul. But from the industrial age education system, it borrows the system's approach, a highly functional structure, a repeatable quest learning cycle, and the deep integration of an AI toolkit. It's the ultimate middle path. Think about it. AI steps in to do the heavy lifting of customized academic tutoring. That scales effortlessly. AI never ever gets tired of explaining math or history. And because the AI is handling that repeatable architecture, the human mentor is completely freed up. Freed up to do what? To actually be a living example and provide genuine human connection. That is the one thing AI can never replicate. Moving on to Section 4, actionable steps to start. Okay, so setting up a PMC cell sounds kind of daunting, right? But the source breaks it down into just 4 simple steps. 1. Gather a small group of students. 2. Find an awakened mentor who has their own genuine reflective practice. 3. Set up just one AI account to handle the structured tutoring. And 4. Set the academic slider to unschooling, which just means you let questions and projects drive the learning right from day one, rather than forcing a rigid curriculum. It's practical, it's immediate, and it totally bypasses the massive bureaucracy of traditional schools. And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, the mentor on the climb. Listen, structure alone is not going to cut it. There's this one piercing insight from the text. A cell with an unawakened mentor running the Open PMC vocabulary is just industrial age schooling with better language. You can have the absolute best AI, the coolest frameworks, and the most open source protocol in the world, but the irreducible core of this entire system is the human being at the center of it. If the mentor isn't genuinely curious, if they aren't actively pursuing knowledge themselves, the protocol is useless. The protocol just creates the conditions, the mentor is the catalyst. Which really leaves us staring at one massive provocative question. If we actually want to give the next generation both deep personal insight and practical modern tools, we have to look at ourselves first. Whether you are a parent, an educator, or literally just a lifelong learner, you have to ask yourself, have you genuinely begun the climb, or are you still comfortable at the camp? Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating source material. Keep questioning, keep climbing, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.